33% of new hires leave an organization within their first 6 months, which is absolutely crazy.
Amy Davies is the founder of First 30, helping companies transform their employee experience through strategic onboarding. How do you define successful onboarding?
If you have set your employee up for success, you've given them the information they need to succeed, they have the tools they need to do their job, and they feel both physically and psychologically safe in your organization.
But there's a critical window that changes everything.
Once we've kind of imprinted, we build cognitively, we build what's called a belief system. And once that belief system is established, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to change.
How do poor onboarding practices affect a company's bottom line?
It costs at a minimum, it costs 30 to 50% of an employee's salary to replace them.
Yet most companies continue to make the same devastating mistake.
We need to make managers feel accountable for the success on their team. This is really important for the health of your organization.
So, of all the things in employee experience, what inspired you to focus on onboarding?
It might not be what you expect. When I started my business, First 30, we actually work in the outplacement field. So we help employees who have been laid off. So we work with the companies and we help them recover from the job loss and get back to work. And I decided when I started the business that I wanted to call it First 30 because I wanted it to be open to other programs. I thought, I know myself. There's going to be more to come. This is chapter 1. And so sure enough, people thought we were an onboarding company because of the name, right? First 30. And so we started getting lots of calls about employee onboarding, which I had some experience in. And then over the years, I've spoken with so many companies about their employee onboarding programs. And we sort of just organically moved into that space. And now that I'm here, wow. It is such an interesting area of the business with so much opportunity. It seems like one of those funny things that companies just have so much trouble for, I'm sure they say for whatever reason, but I know the reasons why they're having these issues. And there's so much opportunity.
That is so interesting. And you were totally right. I would have never even thought that because the name is First 30. I thought you probably started with onboarding and ended up doing outplacement because I know that you do that.
Yeah, well, I was thinking of our business, even though all of our programs extend for more than 30 days, I was taking some 30-day, I was doing yoga with Adrian and they always have their 30-day program. And I'm like, it has such a nice ring to it. So that's how it all started. And I couldn't be happier with where it's gotten to.
Amazing. So when people think about onboarding, I think most people think about like the paperwork and the orientation.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you define successful onboarding?
Well, of course, these, paperwork and all those things are part of a successful onboarding program. But I see it as, if you have set your employee up for success, you've given them the information they need to succeed, they have the tools they need to do their job, and they feel both physically and psychologically safe in your organization, then you've done a really great job. And the other thing is, get them excited. I think too often we think about, okay, we're ticking boxes and getting things done for the onboarding. But really what we want to focus on is they should be excited to walk in the door on the first day. And that momentum should continue once they arrive.
Yes. And we talk a lot about like first impressions in hiring. I'm sure everyone has heard how important a first impression is. How does that psychology really apply to a new hire's first few weeks?
Well, as you know, we always say you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. But one of the big mistakes that we make as organizations is we don't ask the second question, which is, why? Why do you not get a second chance to make a first impression? And the reason comes down to imprinting. So if your listeners aren't familiar with it, we're cognitively highly receptive when we engage with any new stimulus, whether it be a new restaurant, whether it be a new person, or whether it be a new workplace. So we really want to think about that impression that we're making, because once we've kind of imprinted, we build what's called a belief system. And once that belief system is established, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to change. So those first few interactions are so much more meaningful than we realize. It can impact productivity. It can impact a commitment to the business and faith and trust in the business. So we want to think about, and companies, I think, tend to think that you're going to get that second chance to make a first impression because the person maybe needs to be there. But it doesn't really work that way. And just because a company's doing one thing or another doesn't mean that cognitively we're suddenly going to change to accommodate our employer. That's just not possible.
Is there a length or a period where that imprinting takes place? Is it first few times you interact with a recruiter? Is it first days with your manager?
And it's so great that you bring that up, because I'm often asked, do I see recruiting as part of the onboarding process? I think of once you've signed a job offer, that's when the actual pre-boarding, and I would consider pre-boarding part of onboarding, that's when that process begins. But it's not to say that the whole candidate experience doesn't have an impact. So I do think that it's really important for recruiters to think about the fact that the person is imprinting as well, and try to look for opportunities to make them feel, like we talked about, safe, to make them feel trust, to have sort of a consistent positive experience with them. And then hopefully that's continued once they move from the recruiter to the team.
And there's something that I always talk about: retention. Anyone who's heard about this podcast knows that I talk about retention, and that my hot take is that recruiters are responsible for retention as well, not just getting people in the door. So how does effective onboarding impact employee retention and engagement?
Yeah, so we know that there's a lot of data around the improvements that a great onboarding program will lift engagement by 82%. But we also know that it improves retention. And one thing I will say is companies are very, very bad at tracking the retention rates. So if you're a recruiter listening to this, or HR person listening to this, start tracking your retention rates, especially if you're just about to make some improvements to your employee onboarding program, because it can be a huge success story for you. Right now, about 33% of new hires leave an organization within their first 6 months, which is absolutely crazy. And we're going to talk later about cost benefit analysis of that. But it costs a lot of money when people leave. So it really does have a huge impact, because think about it too, when new hires start, sometimes there's that sigh of relief, isn't there? Because it's like, someone to fill this gap in the organization. I'm finally going to get the help I need and the expertise I need. And then that person's out the door within a month or 2 months. It's not just about the hard costs. It's about what is the psychological impact to the employees that are constantly going through this.
Yes. And I even say it to the recruiters, at some point you feel like you're on a hamster wheel of recruiting for the same exact role over and over again. And it's that's why I say it's so important, the role of the recruiter, because it's look, if you keep hiring for the same role, you're part of the problem too, because you should know from what the people who've left have said, their feedback. And if you are in contact with them, you should know what you need to be looking for. Look, it's something as sometimes that the hiring manager that you're hiring for is a micromanager. Then be sure to hire someone and present candidates that are totally okay with micromanaging. Because yes, ideally, should that exist? No, but as a recruiter,
I was going to say, does that exist?
I mean, is it okay? Should it be the case?
Yeah.
But you can't change that, right? You're not the person's manager. You're not in management. So as a recruiter, you adapt and adjust, and you find find the people that would fit in there. That's why I say
Yeah.
retention is our thing.
Yeah. And it's, I love that you think that as a recruiter too, because too often it's the case where I think companies experience is that the recruiter kind of considers their job over once the offer letter is signed. So recruiters like you who are much more progressive and the advice you're giving is meaningful to organizations because we need the recruiter with the same priorities as the organization.
Yeah, it's really the only way to succeed. And kind of along those lines, and you mentioned pre-boarding previously. So pre-boarding is really an important step before onboarding even begins. How can recruiters stay involved during that phase?
Yeah. So, they can definitely set the new hire up for success by maybe sending them a text or giving them a call the week before, making sure that they're ready to go if they have any questions. Another thing that I really like to do, and I recommend to our clients that they do, is send information precisely about what that person needs to know for their first day and make sure it applies to them. What is the location of the office? What is the transit situation? What is the stop they need to get off at? Where's the parking? Where are they going to get their coffee? I am really a slave to my coffee and I don't want to have any doubt that I'm going to be able to get my coffee, especially on that first day. And lunch, right? Like, what if there's no lunch facilities and you can't buy lunch at the office and you need to know to bring your lunch in? You don't want someone who is caffeine deprived, tired, and then they're not eating during their first day. That is awful. So we were talking about, making someone feel safe. That's just another way. And I would get that message out sooner rather than later, even send it twice because they might miss it the first time. A lot's going on. And maybe the day before they've had all those days to get nervous, like maybe send it a number of business days before they're getting started and make sure that message, I know I'm getting into the weeds a bit, is clearly labeled for them because you know how hard it is to wade through emails, especially when you have that nervous energy of starting a new job.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that. I think back to when I've been actively recruiting. I know every Sunday, because most of the companies, there's always like a first day, right?
Yeah.
A defined first day. Very few companies you can start whatever day of the week. But larger companies where there's like orientation and everything planned, everyone, let's say, starts on a Monday. The Sunday before, I was always texting all of my candidates and be like, hey, so excited. If it's remote, it's like log in at this time because this is this. And obviously I talk to the hiring manager and tell them about this. I'm not telling someone to log in at 10 and their manager's expecting them at 8 or anything like that. But I tell them the things that no one thinks about telling them, like, hey, you're going to be at the office for training. I don't live there, but I love the coffee shop right next door.
That's so nice.
That type of thing. Like, really, people aren't going to ask this, but it's so important to know. And it just takes off the stress of the first day. It's like,
I love that. And then they feel at home in the neighborhood already. You're really wanting to make them feel at home. I just wanted to add one thing to what I was saying, because I think it's really important. And this might fall to the recruiter too, because if they're talking to the new hire, maybe things aren't going right. Maybe they're not getting the technology. That's a big one. Not getting someone's laptop to them or even PPE. And they can't actually do their job and they're sort of mulling around. So one thing we really want to be careful of is we don't want to normalize that for the employee. It may be a blip or it might be a bigger problem that the organization has to address. But if I'm a new hire, I shouldn't be hearing from anyone, oh, that's just the sort of thing that happens around here. Get used to it, right? And that often will happen with new hires where people make those comments and the whole trust is starting to be broken down from that point.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a thing. And yeah, as a recruiter, I always make sure, I have a unique background of, I've done agency and I've done marketplace. So I've done external before moving into internal. So I always have that, like, okay, I want to make sure that they get there to my client the first day. Well, I took that when I went internal too. I want to make sure that I'm the person who's like, do they have their computer already? Oh, Rona, you don't have to worry about that. Absolutely, I have to worry.
Yes.
I want to make sure. And there have been places where, for whatever reason, the computer isn't ready. It did get there. We tell the person, you don't have to log in this first day. You're still getting paid. This is on us. Your first day starts when we consider that you are ready to start, when we've set you up to success, part of that is having the tools that you need to start.
And Rona, that's another great point. And one of the things I recommend to employers is, I know it feels weird, but let your new hire start late on their first day and then let them leave early, because their manager needs to be fresh too. So their manager can get in, check their email, get their coffee. And you're seeing a theme here, I'm sure. But then they can, and the person's probably tired. It's probably a place they haven't gone, many times before. So it makes it so much more smooth when you let them start late and leave early on their first day.
And I love the leave early part, because how many times have you not been on your first day and it's like you're there counting the minutes till 5? Look, everyone's done training you because they're like finishing their day. There's nothing that you have to do. And you're just there like playing this game of like, I'm going to leave at 5:01 so that I'm not that person. Come on, just release people from that.
Yeah. And say it like, please get out of here. We know this is, we always let our new hires leave. We always ask our new hires to leave early on their first day. You have that permission structure all set up, and it doesn't seem weird and it doesn't seem like they're not committed. But my goodness, there's nothing worse than sitting around in your first day with nothing to do and really trying to look busy. It's embarrassing and uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's just so awkward and so weird.
Yeah.
So what are some of the common challenges that you see organizations face when they're implementing onboarding programs, and how can they address these?
Well, there's a number of issues. I mean, one of them is getting buy-in from the organization, and that can mean many things. I think that the greatest onboarding programs, or any refresh or revamp to an onboarding program, has a senior sponsor in the organization. So someone who will advocate for it, someone who will get the budget necessary and allow for there to be dedicated resources. In order to make that happen for the HR team or whoever kind of is seen to own onboarding, the best thing you can do, and we're going to talk about it shortly, is to make sure that you have the data and the numbers, like how much is new hire turnover costing our business every year, and what can we do to improve that? Or are we not getting our new hires up to productivity as quickly as we think we should be, and that we're losing opportunities because of that? So that is one. And then the other is to make sure that if you are refreshing or revamping your onboarding program, you want to have a cross-functional team of managers who have had new hires come in the last couple of years to participate in the process, because we can set up the best employee onboarding program and then no one utilizes it because we haven't got that buy-in. So as you know, people who are involved in the process of change and who have helped create the program are so much more likely to advocate for it and to use it. So make sure that you have that cross-functional team and you find out what's working for them, because the other thing is we don't want to start fixing things that aren't broken, right? But that is a big barrier to getting onboarding right. Because I often hear from organizations, some managers are great at this, some not so much. Well, those managers then need to be coached, right? So then there's an opportunity. And the other thing I heard just the other day is training for managers about how to onboard new hires is optional. Can't be optional. Everybody needs to know. Anyone who's hiring needs to know how to onboard, how the organization is set up to onboard this person. And there is a process they need to follow for sure.
That's so interesting. How can that be optional?
Yeah, I don't understand it myself, but I think because people are so busy in organizations, that's where I think the senior sponsorship comes in. That's where the cross-functional teams, we need to make managers feel accountable for the success on their team. It's not to say it's all up to them at all. And just because someone leaves doesn't mean their manager's done something wrong, but there does need to be a certain accountability. This is really important for the health of your organization.
I love how you mentioned the sponsor and the senior sponsor. And on this podcast, we talk about being strategic recruiters,
Mm-hmm.
strategic partners to the business. You
Yes.
can't be on your own creating beautiful programs that no one cares about
Yeah.
and that no one knows about, because you're going to continue to be saying to your HR and TA peers, I just want a seat at the table. Well, to get a
Yes.
seat at the table, you have to speak people's language and you have to
Mm-hmm.
bring them in on the things that you do.
Yeah.
Onboarding is a beautiful and perfect way to start those cross-functional things, because it's just the nature of it. There's no way this is only an HR thing.
And it's an exciting part of the business too, right? Every people do get excited about improving onboarding programs. They get excited about participating in that. You can set up, you can set up buddy programs where, HR might be the one to start setting them up, but that's a great opportunity to let your more junior employees shine because they can play a large role in that. So there's so many exciting, fun things that you can do with onboarding that have, I talk in a lot of the sessions that I do with HR leaders. It's like, this is feel good, right? Like I talk a lot about creating a praise culture. Creating a praise culture, it's a feel good thing, but it actually has a business benefit and the numbers back that up. So yes, it's feel good, but it's also going to help your business be more profitable.
Yes, 100%. And like you said, the buddy program, I mean, it
Yeah.
also helps with your employee engagement. Okay, so now
Oh,
you've been
yes.
working there. Everyone wants to get promoted. Everyone can't get promoted.
Yeah.
Everyone needs to work up to being promoted. So when
Yeah.
you take someone who's on that track and give them an additional responsibility, of course, with their buying, it feels so good that you're helping the company and you're helping welcome the new people on your team. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've never really seen anywhere where I've implemented a buddy program where the buying from the employees working as buddies isn't like something that everyone wants to do. It's like we usually get like too many people
Too
wanting to
many
do it.
people who want to do it. Yes. I've seen that as well. And it's exciting to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So everyone knows I love content. I'm a content creator, and content doesn't only mean the external content that you post online.
Yes.
I love to tell that to people. When I say content, it's not
Yeah.
only that.
Yeah.
So in respect to onboarding, lots of companies just hand you a booklet, either a virtual one
Mm-hmm.
or a real one, and there's
Mm-hmm.
information overload when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to onboarding. How do you
Mm-hmm.
approach breaking this content down into information, into pieces that is digestible for the new
Yeah.
hire?
So a lot of, I would say that a lot of companies have HRIS and their HRIS has not prioritized onboarding. So this can be difficult to do with that, except the very, very highest end ones. So you might have to think about the how this happens, but certainly sending out information in bite-sized chunks is a really good idea. So I always say that onboarding should not be an avalanche of information. It should be a babbling brook because memories are fragile at the best of times. But when you have that, nervous energy maybe, or you have information overload, your memory is like a sieve and maybe the organization feels like they're ticking a box by giving it all to you, but you're not remembering any of it anyway. We have to think about how different learning styles might apply here as well. Some people really respond well to the, in-person content being delivered, and then other people prefer to review things and go over them themselves, maybe a combination of those two. But again, it can't be all at once. So I think that email sequencing tools are really good for this. Some systems have them, some organizations won't. There's great programs that marketers use. You might want to talk to your marketing team. You could probably talk to us if you don't know what they are, but getting it programmed so that new hires every few days receive, or even every day for the first week or two, receive information. That's what we do with our program and our platform is we space it out. So each day you're getting something and the emails are clearly labeled. And then there's a place that might look and feel a little bit different than your SharePoint or your intranet sites. Because what happens is if everything looks exactly the same, people are going to forget what onboarding versus everything else is. So we have a platform that we use with clients, and some of them actually leave it branded first 30 so that their employees know what to look for and what is onboarding content versus everything else in the organization.
That's amazing. And I love the concept of the drip campaign
Yes.
For onboarding.
Yeah.
And this is also an opportunity for you to leverage these cross-functional relationships. This is where you talk to marketing about tools.
Yes.
If you have an internal comms team, they can help you with the drip campaigning and all of this.
Yes, for sure they can. Yeah.
And your learning and development team, they can help you create this program. So a lot of times with onboarding, it just falls on HR, and we should be able to know and leverage the resources that we have. Look, you're good at hiring. You're good at compliance. If you're in HR, you're good at whatever piece you are. You're not necessarily a marketer, an internal communicator, or like someone who creates learning and development programs. If you have these people in your organization, bring them in to help shape this program so that it's successful.
Yeah. And can we talk for a minute about the look and feel of the resources that you're getting? Because you and I are both probably very marketing minded as in addition to everything else. And that's a learned skill, right? So just because you're doing something else and you don't have those skills today doesn't mean you can't learn them. We both learn them and they're actually fun to learn. But what I see with onboarding materials is it's like this hodgepodge of all of these different resources from different departments with different looks and feels and fonts and logos. And some of them are 20 years old and some of them were produced last year. And when we think of content, like we were talking cognitively, how we respond to new stimulus, consistency breeds trust. So consider that. Consistency breeds trust. And we want those things to all look cohesive because familiarity also inspires trust. So that's more important than people realize, and it can make a bigger difference. It's just not something that companies seem to think matters all that much. They care about their external brand, but if you look at any of the top brands in the world, as soon as you look at the page or the online ad or you walk in their store, you know you're there just by the colors and the shapes that you are seeing. You've got that. And that's what you want with your onboarding material as well.
You want to hear a funny story?
Yes.
I once got in trouble for bothering the marketing team because when I started at a company to lead their TA team, I asked them for their brand kit.
Okay.
They're like, no, you don't worry
That's
about
for
that.
marketing.
That's for external. That's for marketing. Yes. Why are you bothering them? They're busy. I'm like, wait, so your internal stuff doesn't follow what your brand kit is? And I'm not bothering someone. Just send it to me. I know you have it. But yeah, that's how people don't understand that it's one brand. Your employer brand, your internal brand with your employees, it's one brand. And the more you make it look the same, and the more you make it look the same, like you said, the more people identify with it.
Yeah. And I just want to add that I think organizations should have people who are as excited and committed as you are about this. And we want to make sure there is an excitement factor that does add something. And well, you have all the expertise, but there is that secret something that great contributors have. And it might not be that this individual isn't excited about other things to do with their work, but when you're thinking of refreshing and revamping an onboarding program, find people to lead these projects who are actually excited about them, not someone who's going to consider it just an add-on and is not something they want to do. So instead of telling people kind of who's doing it, maybe find the people who are really interested in this and help them figure out a way to be the ones to lead that project.
Great point. Any other big mistakes that you see companies make with their onboarding materials?
Yeah, I think that the other thing, and I kind of brought it up already, is that they'll send out one email with a catch-all where everything's in that one. And so and they could name it like welcome to, First 30 or welcome to whatever business. And then that's the only time that the employees got an email, especially if there's calls to action in those messages. That is so easily missed. Again, we're dealing with people that have that nervous energy. They're trying to make a good impression. And there's nothing more embarrassing than not, having that available to you and then having to go ask someone. So the other mistake I think that companies make is if you have a benefits program, if you have a payroll system, there's probably resources that are guided, they're like task-based videos. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do this. Share them with your employees. So often, the company that's providing you those benefits probably has that all set up. It's probably available on YouTube. Just link to those little training modules, because then when your employee, after 2 or 3 months, they have to fill out their first benefit, form. They don't have to go to their manager and say, oh, here's my prescription. How do I do this? That's so embarrassing. It doesn't make anyone feel good. So you want to definitely think about, how do you enable them to have easy access to that information?
And timely information is the most important, because yes, you start and they give you all this information in your first days, but open enrollment doesn't necessarily fall during your first days.
Yes.
So why not everyone who's been onboarded that year before open enrollment, a week or two before, send them a refresher email from that drip campaign that you sent. Hey, open enrollment is coming up. This is your first time doing it at this company. Here's a refresher of how it's done. Here's where you log in. You'll get more information from HR as you go. But that way, people aren't like, wait, what is this? Asking HR, asking the managers. You're having a benefits conversation. And some people are asking, wait, what's the portal that I log into?
Yeah,
where
absolutely
catch them up to where everyone else is.
And there's really great ways, like First 30 does this. So full disclosure, I can't be objective about this because we do have a platform that does this, but you can create a really nice space for your new hires to go to access all of this information that's organized. So often I see this sort of data or this resource dump on a page that's not clearly labeled, that's not color coded, and they expect people to be able to so easily navigate it. We're used to using technology that is user friendly. If you shop on Amazon, if you use Netflix, it should be that easy for them. So, you can always talk to me, of course, but maybe there's other technologies out there you can use that are great, or a learning management system, but it needs to be housed in a way that it makes it easy for your employees to find things, even months after they started their job.
100 million%. And I come from a background of software engineering and project management. One of my favorite books of all time is called Don't Make Me Think. It's a very, very easy read, and it's not technical at all. It's really helped me in every program, everything that I've done, even after leaving the technical world, because that's how we think. The whole book is about web usability. It's probably way dated because I haven't done this, or maybe they have a new version, but don't make people think. That's the whole concept. Make it so clear. You go to Amazon, you know exactly where to do things, even if you've never been on Amazon before. That's how your internal communication or everything that you do for your employees should be. They shouldn't need training to figure out where your things are.
Well, and that's the hard part, right? Because a lot of the HRIS or these other platforms, they do certain things really, really well. And a company doesn't want to have to keep paying for all this new technology. The problem is the systems you have don't do what we've described well. And that's just the reality of it. And so it's hard because companies say they'll say they have an onboarding module, but that's not what it does. And that's not what it was built for. So just start looking for technology that's built for what you're needing to solve. And you're going to have your employees are going to have a much better experience.
Yes. So how do poor onboarding practices affect a company's bottom line?
Yes. So what I like to think of it as a calculation, because we talked earlier about, we know that we lose a lot of new hires if we don't have a great onboarding program. It costs at a minimum, it costs 30 to 50% of an employee's salary to replace them. As a recruiter, you know that stats so well, but it can be up to 200% because of the lost working hours, because of the impact on other employees when these things happen. So what we want to do is we want to track the amount of people that we're losing within the first, like, I would say even 18 months, that might be able to be related back to your onboarding. Take that number, so you take an average of what the salary would be. So say you have, you hire 40 people a year, you're losing 13. I've got all the calculations here. Actually, I figured this out. So say you average the salary of 60K and you times that by 13 and divide it by 2. Maybe we should put this calculation in the show notes. That's $390,000. Okay. And that's just 13 employees. I use the unlucky number 13 so people would remember it. Share that calculation with your leadership and help them understand that, for a significantly smaller amount of money, you could improve your onboarding program. And the data shows that improves productivity by 70%, new hire retention by 82%. So there's all these fun ways to explain in ways that a CFO would really gravitate towards how making this small investment and this relatively small amount of time spent will truly improve the bottom line.
We are friends of the CFO here on this podcast. And I like to ask all of my guests, anytime we talk about new things, because we're throwing out the playbook, right? We're doing things differently. What's the business case for onboarding and pre-onboarding? How do I tell my CFO, let's be besties? I need money.
Yeah. So that is a great place to start. And then obviously you want to understand what the investment will be to make these things happen, and whether you need external services like a First 30 or like a great HR consultant or whatever it is you need to actually make it happen. Because what I find with a lot of organizations, unless they act, this is going to sound like it's self-promoting, but I totally don't mean it that way, because I've seen it happen so many times before. It gets deprioritized when it's someone internal running it, unfortunately. So that's where an external consultant can really help move the needle a lot more quickly. You need an organization that has great project management skills so they can help keep everyone on task. So that is, look at the numbers, show them the cost of the business, show them the potential benefit, especially if you're having a new hire retention problem. It can go a long way. And then explain to them talk to them about imprinting. What is the cognitive response that we have? Learn a little more about it, put up some fun slides, tell the story of how onboarding is going to make a meaningful difference. Everyone loves a story. And if you got the data to back it up, that is going to be so helpful. And then maybe you can show them like, hey, we could go take an organization you think's doing it really well. We could go from this and then show them what the outcome could look like. We could go from this to this. I always think that is a really great and powerful way to, make a case for investing in onboarding.
Love it. And I wouldn't be me if I don't talk about my video. You know how much I love video.
Yes.
Is there an opportunity to use video to enhance onboarding experience for new hires?
Yes. So with a platform like ours, we actually have the capability to add a video to every single date of the program. I love that, but very few organizations will commit to having every day there's like a 1 or 2 minute video of in the program that the person is taking. But if you don't have, if your organization is not going to sign up for that, which I totally understand, certainly in pre-boarding, you can send them a message from the leadership team. You could send them a message from different people on the team. You probably have videos that you share externally about your vision, mission, values, your brand for your customers or your clients. Share those videos as well. So you might not have to do a ton of work. And hey, here's the other thing. You and I both know that some of the greatest videos can be filmed just on our iPhone. Right?
Yes.
And it's sometimes that authenticity of just a CEO or CFO on an iPhone saying, you don't have to do it personalized. Just say, hey, I'm so glad you've joined the business. We're looking forward to having you start. Here's a few things you might want to know about the organization. And it can feel it's sincere, right? So you don't have to spend a fortune at this anymore. We have so many simple resources that are available to us that are in our hands every day. probably pretty much attached to us.
Yes.
So there is no excuse. And they've got great cameras on them.
Yeah. And also never assume that your new hire has seen all of your employer branding materials.
Absolutely. Yes, that's absolutely right.
Because even if you sent them, even if it's plastered all over your careers page, look, there's so many people who've never seen it or they don't remember it. You have to see things many times to actually remember. So look, if they've seen it already, they're just going to skip it. It's fine. Yes. No one's going to die. Leverage your materials.
Exactly. There's nothing wrong with a reminder. We just talked about the fact that memories are fragile.
So anything about onboarding that I didn't ask that you think is important for listeners to know?
Well, the last thing I would say about onboarding is the same as planting a tree, right? When is the best time to plant a tree? It's 20 years ago or today. Same with your onboarding program. If you haven't invested in it, it was probably a good idea to do it 5, 10, 20 years ago. But today, it's also a really good day to invest in your onboarding. But actually, I did have a question for you. You talked about helping new candidates succeed. And I was just wondering, because I would like to also take this back to my clients as well, is, what are some of the things as a recruiter? You mentioned some of them, but you do to help your new hires succeed, whether it's within the, pre-boarding, within the first week, month, year, whatever it is.
I like to say I love to stay in touch with my new hires. Our relationship doesn't end once you are hired. For many reasons, right? You've already formed that bond. They trust you. So I check in with people and I make anyone on my team check in with their new hires 30, 60, 90 days. And the first week we check in every day.
Wow.
So many times we've saved someone from leaving for a misunderstanding, right? We talk a lot about some candidates feel they were catfished by, the recruiter told me this, and then I start the first day and this happens, or I was told this during hiring and this is now happening. As a recruiter, you can get in front of those things and be like, hey, hiring manager, where's the breakdown? What's happening? And we've been able to save it because it's most of the time just a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
If you leave that unchecked, they have no one to talk to because they're just starting a relationship with their hiring manager, right? With their manager and their team. They're not necessarily going to complain. They don't want to be seen as that. What they're going to do is keep looking for a job. They were just on the job market. So if you get ahead of that and you truly form a relationship with them, it's like people are always so amazed. It's like, oh, thank you so much, Rona, for checking in on me. I've never been told, leave me alone. So that's one, like start that relationship. People always and they give you good feedback that for the future as well. And I talked about the texting people. Yeah. When I used to work in person, I would always go to lunch with the new hire at some point during the first 2 weeks.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, that's really good. Because you're like the first line of defense, right? So you can, and the other thing, that you're making me think of is that we go through a learning curve whenever we're learning new technology and also when we're starting a new business. And if you don't know a lot about the learning curve, I'm sure it's something you can look up. It's fairly well known, but we go through these very uncomfortable phases of a learning curve where we're conscious that, I want to say our perceived incompetence, right? We're consciously incompetent. And that can be an awful feeling for a new hire. So I love that you're checking in along the way because you actually, and you're a pretty empathic person. I think you'd probably be able to pick up on pretty quickly if they're struggling, even if they're getting all the support they need. It doesn't mean they're not struggling. And a lot of us are conditioned to smile and nod, even if we're having a really tough time and admitting, hey, I actually need help here. So I love that you do that because there's just so many opportunities to improve the candidate's outcome, but also improve the outcome for the organization.
And the reason why I think, and I always tell any team, and I encourage and require any recruiter on my team to do this, it's because we're natural relationship builders. It's what we do. That's not necessarily the personality of other people on HR team or the team where the person works. You are the relationship builder. Go ahead and continue doing that and leverage that information. That's also how you become a true partner to the business, because you're bringing back information that is helpful and helps set the person up for success.
It's so funny because whenever I go to HR events, I always can tell who the recruiters and the talent acquisition folks are. You can always tell. It almost feels like you're at a sales conference when you're talking to these people, which I absolutely love. But this is a great asset that an organization has, either as a partner or internally. So utilize that asset.
It's funny. I was recently at a conference at Breakfast, and one of the ladies hosted a dinner at the zoo. So this was a bunch of recruiters in a room with two of the zookeepers giving us a presentation about animals and tigers and telling us everything about it. They said any questions at the end. And I don't think these two guys were ready for the amount of questions, and they were great questions. They were happy. They told we even know how you get a job as a zookeeper.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, we asked them everything. That's just who we are. And I just kept laughing. I'm like, they were not ready for being in a room full of recruiters. We know all about the animals. We know all about their job. We know if they like their job, by the way. They told us all of this.
Yeah, you get a lot out of people. Yeah. But that's another thing. Like, people will tell you things that they might not tell their manager, right? And it's not that you're going to break their confidence, but there's certainly ways, or their confidentiality, but there are ways that you can give a little indication to the organization that maybe there's a little intervention needed.
Yes. And also, it's a great way to get feedback on your process, right? At day 90, when I do that 90-day check-in, I ask, kind of like, I don't ask it this way, but it's like, look, now we're besties. Now you trust me. I didn't leave you hanging dry.
Right.
What can I change about the recruiting process? Go back and tell me, what did you like and what did you not like? Yes, they've already filled out the NPS survey. They already have that information. But now, 90 days in, what could I have done as a recruiter to set you up for success for this role and other people coming along? Some of the best feedback I've got has been at that 90-day when I asked that question.
Yeah. And, it is really important to survey your employees, as not to do your engagement survey, but actually a new hire survey. And if you ever do plan on refreshing or revamping your onboarding program, make sure that you do the research in advance and you run the same survey that you're going to run in 3-6 months, a year with your new hires, because guess what? You can benchmark your success, which means you have a starting data point and you're going to be investing in your onboarding program. So we like to make HR leaders look like rock stars in their organization. So we always say, when you're going to start a new program, do the research early, and then you can go back to that same data and say, hey, we improved satisfaction with onboarding by X amount a year later. And that's a very powerful way to justify the work and investment. And again, your CFO is going to love that.
Yes. So this has been an amazing conversation. I'm sure all the listeners are going to get a lot of value out of it. How can listeners connect with you?
Yeah, well, the best place to go is LinkedIn. I feel like I live there part-time. So by all means, LinkedIn is a great place to start. And then, of course, you can visit our website at www.first30ready.com. But yeah, those are the best ways. And there's all kinds of ways you can find me on the website as well.
Perfect. And I'll include all of those links in the show notes. Thank you again. This was a great conversation. I'm so excited.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I learned a lot too. And, it's always great to talk to people like you who are as excited as I am about, employee onboarding and making sure that both the employee and the company they're both successful in this process. One is not more important than the other. So seeing someone else who's an employee advocate is really great.
If you want more actionable advice, like the advice shared in this episode, I write a weekly newsletter for TA professionals who want to take a more strategic approach to recruiting. You can sign up at throwouttheplaybook.com/newsletter. That's throwouttheplaybook.com/newsletter. The link is in the show notes.